Chapter 6 is entitled Montezuma, the Alhambra, and Arapaho. The snow began melting in the high country, and June finally arrived. Sandy and Larry came up from Denver one day and asked if we could put up 6 boys and feed them while they worked on the new ski area. They needed Max and his cat for the road building and clearing trails. The boys, all Easterners, were teenagers, sons of friends of Larry and Sandy, who might buy stock in the Arapaho Basin Corporation. We were told they were eager to work. The Forest Service permit had come through and everything was set to go. They could ride up to Arapaho Basin every day with Max and Earl. There was no furniture in the main ranch house where the boys would sleep, but it was clean. We had scrubbed down the logs using portable firefighting equipment for pressure and utilizing water from the small irrigation ditch which ran in front of the house in our cabin. The work crew would be eating in our cabin. They were from Dartmouth, Harvard, and similar colleges. I knew they'd feel right at home using the hardwood ladder-back chairs and table and the white couch. Alma held her breath when she saw these 6-footers leaning back on her lovely chairs. Luckily, the chairs were New England made and survived this rough treatment. Our biggest problem was feeding the boys, and us for that matter. We had a little savings and could buy some meat. I'd put in a garden back of the old barn and we could see the carrots and lettuce coming up. Iceberg lettuce was one of the things which didn't freeze at night. The days were warm, but at night it got so cold that sometimes there'd be a thin sheet of ice on the water bucket. We had put a bench out front with a wash basin and bucket, towels we hung on nails, and there was a cracked mirror on the wall. If the boys wanted to have a bath, they could go down to the river, which they did. As one boy said, that's river so cold I couldn't hang on to my soap. Meat, vegetables, and salad we had. What else to feed these hungry boys? More came to the rescue, showing me how to bake 6 loaves of bread in the wood stove. 6 loaves a day it was. Breakfast took some, lunches took a lot, and usually when they returned from the mountain with Max, I had taken the fresh loaves out of the oven. The boys would sit right down and go through a loaf or more before it cooled, spreading butter on it so it wouldn't melt. Then they were happy for a couple of hours until supper time. Our little savings fund was slipping away, but we felt it was for a good cause. By mid-July, we couldn't afford to buy meat for these hungry boys. Max Bunker appeared one day with half a venison. I asked him, "How come? It's July. This isn't hunting season, Max." "Well, if them darn Texans can come up here in October and hunt, I guess us locals could go out when it's safe and we won't get shot by them fellas." He continued, "I gotta apologize for the grass stains on the meat. What happened was, after I shot it and skinned it out, I went back into the mine. A bear got it and started to drag it off. Well, I trailed him and got it back. Edna and I brought a big pressure cooker and began canning all the venison into stews and sauces. This became necessary as soon as we acquired more venison. One day, Dimp came tearing up in his old pickup. He was trembling all over when he got out. It was before supper, and Max and Earl and the boys had just pulled in. They walked over to see what was wrong. Dimp shouted, "I gotta have help. I've got a doe down in front of my barn." Seeing Max and Earl standing there ready to help, He took a deep breath and relaxed. Lula made me so nervous because I'd never shot a deer before. I saw this doe come up to the barn where my 3 goats were standing around, and she just stood there. So I rushed up to our bedroom and, grabbing the rifle, lit for the back porch. I took careful aim with Lula hanging on to me and begging, "Don't shoot, Tim, don't shoot." I said, "Unhand me, woman." I takes careful aim, but just a click. I'd forgotten to load the darn thing. So I tear back upstairs, gets the ammunition, and loads the gun. Darned if that deer wasn't still standing there with my goats. I aims careful and hits her. Well, we all felt sad about it, knowing how Dim felt, but we knew there was a lot of summer ahead of us and a lot of mouths to feed. Dim said as the guys loaded into the truck to go back and help him, "I knew all you folks here needed it, and I wanted to help out." The next day, the 3 of us, Oma, Edna, and I, were cutting up the venison on the table in our cabin kitchen, the same maple wood table, when there was a knock on the door. The winter before, we had met a fellow who was with the High Altitude Observatory at Climax. We became good friends. He was Dr. Walter Orr Roberts, director of the observatory. Here he was at our door, and there was someone with him. He introduced the portly and very dignified gentleman as Dr. Harlow Shapley, director of Harvard University Observatory. Dr. Shapley looked at Oma Dercum, who was wearing a bloody apron made of flour sacking, her gray hair all askew, at Edna, still cutting away on the meat at the table, and at me, who was just as messy. Dercum, he looked puzzled. I guess he was wondering to himself, "Roberts, what have you brought me into?" "Dercum," he said again. "I used to know a Dr. Dercum in Philadelphia, who was president of the American Philosophical Society when I was vice president. It can't be the same family, can it?" Poor Oma. A graduate of Vassar in '06, she was accustomed to being out of her morning clothes and dressed in the afternoon for any friends who might call at her Shaker Heights, Ohio home. She looked as if she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. But in all her 5 feet of dignity, she smiled at Dr. Shapley and said, "Dr. Francis X. Dercum was my husband's cousin." To break the awkward moment, Dr. Roberts asked, "Is that hamburger? I like nothing better than a good fresh hamburger." So we wrapped up some for him. Father Dercum came in and was introduced. We decided it was coffee break time, moved the chairs outdoors on the shady side of the cabin, and served them coffee and fresh buttered bread. Oma had quickly washed after running over to the ranch house where she kept some fresh, clean clothes. It was great fun sitting in the grass or on the stiff-backed chairs, listening to the irrigation ditch dancing along near the garden. Dr. Shapley was telling Father about the great plans for an atmospheric research center to be built in Boulder. Back at Penn State, my 15-year-old nephew, Peter, wanted to come west. He had left home the year before. His desire to become a cowboy led him to New Mexico, where his mother soon located him and brought him back home. However, his parents decided that if he was with us in Colorado for the summer or maybe for the entire year, he might get this desire out of his system. Following Peter's arrival, a letter came from his dad. Knowing Max had taught Peter calf roping and how to ride a horse when we were back at Penn State, his dad felt that we should be fully responsible for the boy since we had enticed him out west. I took Peter aside and I asked him to be really careful and not to do anything dangerous. He smiled at me and said, "Don't worry, Aunt Edna. I know how to take care of myself." Then I felt really worried. All the boys working in Arapahoe Basin, plus Peter, were eagerly looking forward to the local rodeo. None of us, except Max, who had worked on ranches in Montana and the Dakota Badlands, had seen a rodeo. It was a beautiful Sunday in July. The corral was just north of Dillon. There were no bleachers, so we all sat on the fence or on the hoods of the cars parked behind the fence. There was a cool breeze from the mountain snowfields, mingling with the smell of dust and sage being trampled by the milling horses. We all stood in the dust while the American anthem was being sung over a loudspeaker. I was enjoying it all. The parade on horseback with flags flying, the bucking horses throwing off their riders, and the calf roping. Everything was festive with the children excited and stuffing themselves with hot dogs prepared by the 4-H club. I wondered where Max was and couldn't see him or Peter anywhere. Oh, they're probably checking out the horses, I thought. "Look, Rolf and Sonny," I exclaimed. "There's a clown. Isn't he funny? Look at his big red nose and those black and white striped overalls with the crotch down to his knees. And all that red hair. He's got a rope and he's trying to catch a calf." Somebody nearby yelled, "Look, he caught the calf. That's better than most of the riders have done." On the other side of the corral, a man had fallen off the fence and was running over to the clown. "Hey," the man yelled to the clown, "you've dropped your whiskey flask and it's all running out in the dirt." The clown picked up the flask just as the man made a desperate dive into the dirt to try and grab it. The crowd roared with laughter. I thought, what a different 4th of July. Balancing myself on the top unpeeled log pole of the fence, uncomfortable as it was, I was enjoying it all when I heard over the loudspeaker, "The steer riding is next, folks. Hang on to your hats. Coming out of the chute is Pete DeHujas on steer number 5. My God, I said to myself, I never dreamed he'd do this after my warning. I could just see him going head over, being trampled, breaking ribs, arms, legs, and collarbones. All we needed is Peter in the hospital. However, ride that steer Peter did, and he won the first prize money. At the end of the day, Peter came swaggering over to us with a big smile. "Well, Aunt Edna, you won't have to feed me anymore. I got a job as a cowboy out at the Higgins Hidden Valley Ranch for the summer," which, by the way, today is Dillon Valley. "Come over and meet him. You'll really like him." And we did. It was at the Higgins Ranch during a branding party that started at 7 a.m. where I tasted my first prairie or Rocky Mountain oysters. Max horrified me later when he explained to me that these oysters were removed when bull calves are made into steers. Ooh.